Good evening to many of you. Good afternoon to some. Good morning, still others. Thank you so much for joining us today from all around the world. I am Masooma Raza with the Institute for Global Health and Development at Aga Khan University. My role is to help us get started with a few comments to set the stage. First, a reminder that this session is being recorded. We will make the recording available at our website within a week. The Institute's website is aku.edu/IGHD, where IGHD is for Institute for Global Health and Development. We received over 500 registrations from various geographies for the webinar. And with that many people involved, we can do some exciting things to help people learn together and connect in useful ways. For that, we have enabled a few helpful features on Zoom to facilitate your involvement. I encourage you to use the chat function during the course of the webinar to send your comments to either the panelist or to all participants. You can, if you wish, introduce yourself with your name, organization, and location if you are interested in networking. We have also enabled the Q&A function, which you may use to post specific questions for our moderator and speakers to address in the discussion. One of our objectives today is to build communities and network of individuals who would like to explore working together and collaborate with us. Let us know if you are interested. With that, I would like to get us started with just a few words to introduce our host and moderator, Dr. Zulfikar Bhutta, who is very well known to so many of you. Dr. Bhutta is the distinguished university professor and founding director of the Institute for Global Health and Development and the Center of Excellence in Women and Child Health at the Aga Khan University. He is also the co-director of SickKids Center for Global Child Health in Toronto. Dr. Bhutta will be introducing our speakers, but in the interest of time, I will be posting short bios for all of them in the chat. Dr. Bhutta, over to you.
Well, thank you very much for that introduction and for getting us off to a timely start, because I anticipate that there'll be a lot of questions and we want to give ample time to the participants. So ladies and gentlemen, wherever you are in the world, and I know people have connected across time zones, this is one of the flagship projects of the Institute for Global Health and Development in partnership with our long-term collaborators at the University of Oxford. And I'm very, very grateful that Professor Stephen Kennedy has joined us. So I will be introducing the program as it stands currently and the sequence. So we'll start off our proceedings with some initial comments and the remarks by none other than Dr. Amina Abu Bakr, who heads the Institute for Human Development across Aga Khan University campuses, and I'll introduce her shortly. She will be followed by a presentation by Professor Stephen Kennedy from the University of Oxford, and then by Dr. Jay Das, who is the Assistant Director of the Institute for Global Health and Development at Aga Khan University, who will explain the nuts and bolts of what we are doing. And then we will have a Q&A, which I will do my best to moderate as expeditiously and smoothly as possible. And then hopefully, after our interactions complete, we will pass the floor to our wonderful Vice Provost, Dr. Anjum Halai, who's also the Dean of the Faculty of Arts and Sciences at Aga Khan University, to offer some closing remarks. So without further ado, why is this a flagship project of the Institute for Global Health and Development? Because the Institute has had a long-term commitment for supporting women scholars and academics in developing countries at large and marginalized communities, societies in general. And by that, what we mean is that we are fully cognizant of the enormous gap that currently exists in academia by gender, particularly in geographies where the status of development and health for women lags behind that of men. And I am very confident that this is just one step in the direction that we need to take. And that step is important. A lot of people have asked me, why does this exclude senior level or more well-developed academics in our universities? The answer to that is that will also follow in due course, but we wanted to start off with early career scientists and early career scholars who have generally the need for this kind of mentorship and the need for this kind of support to give them a boost in their early stages of their career. As I mentioned, this is a partnership with University of Oxford, and between us, we have received generous support for this initiative from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, for which we are extremely grateful. We are well aware of the foundation's general support for gender equality worldwide, but this in particular is an important program because it targets specifically women scientists working on issues of women. And on those issues, they can be reasonably broad, ranging from social determinants of health to issues that have to do with women's empowerment capacities, reproductive health, and also around maternal, child, and newborn survival. So you will notice when Dr. Jay Das explains that we have kept the remit large. We've kept the format pretty flexible, but under certain parameters for year one. And we want to learn in this 3-year process as we go along as to how we can optimize and make this a little bit more efficient. So let me, without further ado, because I know that we'll have an opportunity for greater discussion in due course, introduce Dr. Amina Abu Bakr. As I mentioned, Dr. Amina Abu Bakr is a professor and director of the Institute for Human Development, Aga Khan University, East Africa, but she covers all campuses. She's is also a senior research scientist at KEMRI, which is a Kenya Medical Research Institute Wellcome Trust Research Program, and is also a visiting faculty at the University of Oxford Department of Psychiatry. Dr. Abu Bakr is a trained developmental psychologist with extensive experience of working in rural and difficult to reach populations. She's the recipient a few years ago of the highly prestigious MRC DFID African Leader Research Leader Fellowship Program to set up a program of work on impact of perinatal HIV on adolescent health and well-being. She is a member of several global committees, and she's been actively involved in efforts to elevate the position and strengthen African science, particularly female scientists. So I would like Dr. Amina Abu Bakr to kindly give us some remarks on women leadership in science and her reflections from East Africa. Amina, over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Buta. My pleasure to be here. I think this is really an exciting program, and congratulations to you and your team for setting this up. You know, in East Africa, like many regions of the world, I think the first key challenge is attracting women into science, you know, for various issues, whether it's societal pressure, the way mentorship and education is, you know, structured. You find that very few women get actually into science. But even in fields such as mine, where many women come in, the challenge is retaining them and actually getting them to move through leadership positions and lead in their fields. So I think there are many challenges about retainment and getting women into leadership position. But I think one of the key challenge is the right mentorship. You know, like right after your PhD program, you know, do you get the right mentors to walk you through the process of building an independent career and building your research and being able to get into the level of being a leader in your field? So I think these are challenges that will be faced across various regions. And I feel this program really addresses the key issues of mentorship. How do we learn to navigate the field in the early years so that you build your career and learn key lessons on how to become a scientist? So I will not take too much time. I know they're exciting presentations and people would need time to ask questions and clarifications. So with those few remarks, I would like to welcome everyone for this session, and I look forward to the discussions and deliberations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Amina, for those kind words, and you're exactly on time. So thank you for being succinct. So without further ado, let me move on to Dr. Jay Das and his presentation. Dr. Das is an assistant professor in the Department of Pediatrics and Child Health and is also, as I mentioned, assistant director of the Institute for Global Health and Development at Arkhand University. He also serves as the section head for public health and epidemiology and is the country director for Cochrane Collaboration. He's been associated with the university for over a decade and has closely worked with me around various programs. He has developed a robust knowledge synthesis and translation center at Arkhand University. And from that pulpit, he's been very closely involved with leading the evidence synthesis for a large number of Lancet series, starting off with undernutrition, childhood diarrhea, pneumonia, newborn and neonatal health as far back as a decade ago, and has also been very closely involved with studies of maternal child health in conflict settings and emergencies, having led those country case studies in Pakistan and Afghanistan. He has authored over 150 international peer-reviewed papers, and he's a co-editor of a book on health and sustainable development goals of Pakistan. So without further ado, Jay, I will pass the floor to you to tell us a bit more about this program and its transformative nature as to how to achieve gender parity in the developing world in science. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Bhutta, for this kind introduction. And hello, everyone. Good morning, afternoon, and evening to wherever you are. And as Dr. Bhutta mentioned, I'll be taking you through this project, the initiative that we have just launched. And before this, I'll just give a brief background on why this was conceptualized and why there is the need to focus on women scientists, especially in early career and especially from the developing world. So I'll start by saying that most of you know that there has been a persistent underrepresentation of women in science. This has been a long-standing debate, although progress has been made over the years or decades, but this is far from what is desired. And this is not in terms of the quantity, but also the quality and also the high inequities that exist between regions, within regions, and even within countries. If women from all corners of each country don't get the equal opportunity to represent themselves or to represent the talent that they have. And unfortunately, the COVID-19 pandemic has worsened all these situation. And the data shows that women are submitting fewer papers. There have been greater dropout of enrollments in university programs. There's missing from the scientific committees or women representation in those committees. And one of the factors which would have contributed to this decline during this time could be pressures due to the traditional caregiving and domestic responsibilities, which were enhanced during the COVID time. So having said so that it's not the field of science where women are underrepresented, it's across the board, across all the domains. And even in the key executive power positions, you'll see that the women are represented by less than 15%. And although there has been progress, but this progress has been very slow. And even you can see the last decade, there hasn't been much change. So shows that greater needs to be done across the board for women. And data shows that out of more than 200 countries, only 26 women had those states. Just over 20%, the government ministers are women. And even within those 20%, you will see that the ministries that these women leaders hold are usually related to the social responsibilities or social ties that we have with women, and they mostly lead ministries related to social affairs, employment, women affairs, gender equality, and the representation of women in key ministries like foreign affairs or finance is even much lower. And when it comes to parliamentarians, only a quarter of those are women, and this is a global data, which huge disparities when it comes to across regions or across countries. Same is the story when we go to the corporate world, and what we see that although there has been an increase, but still less than a third of these key senior management positions in the corporate world are held by women. And again, greater inequities between regions, especially when you see the Asia Pacific region. So the proportion of women is lower. And when you look at individual countries in those regions, you'll see that like India, is only 10%, and Pakistan, only 4% of the women hold these key senior management positions in the major corporations. Now, talking about STEM, which is about science, technology, engineering, and maths. In these fields, you'll see that although the girls score equal or even higher than boys, but the enrollment of women in this field is lower. And it's not just the enrollment, even women taking up positions in these areas is lower. And you can also see that women exit earlier than men in these areas. And the bar graph on the right, you can see that there is greater proportion of women when it comes to arts, humanities, social sciences fields. But when it comes to science technology, the proportion of women is far, far lower than men. So apart from this greater underrepresentation of women in these areas, we also see that women face greater discrimination. The women who are, the lesser number of women who are working in those areas, and roughly 50% of women experience some sort of discrimination who are working in these areas. This could be related to getting a job, getting a raise, a promotion, or support from their peers, or mental health issues. So women, apart from this greater disadvantage of getting into these areas, even face greater discrimination. Talking about research, we see that the current data shows that less than a third or 30% of the world researchers are women. And the data shows far greater disparities within regions, although the regions of Central Asia and Latin America show a higher proportion, but other regions have far lower representation. And even in the developed world of North America and Western Europe, things are not much different. And roughly a third of these researchers are women. So this is a busy slide, and I'm not sure that how much clear it would be on your screens, but this disparity is not at the higher level. You can see that the disparity exists at the basic primary education level. And the adults who are illiterate, 2/3 of those adults are women. And although these disparities are decreasing when we talk about young adults, adolescents, or children, but even out of the 58 children who are out of primary school, 31 million of those are children, are women, sorry. And what we see is that we see that the number of women in research are less than men. We also see that the women who are even working in these areas, compared to their male counterparts or male colleagues, they receive smaller grants. Only 12% of National Science Academy members are women. And in the current evolving or cutting edge technology fields like artificial intelligence or robotics, you'll see that the representation of women is even worse. And 1 in 5 professionals currently is a woman. And the graph on the right shows that as the career progresses from for an individual from bachelor's to master's to doctoral and being a researcher, you'll see that the proportion keeps on declining as their career evolves. So it's not that the women have not contributed to the field of science historically. There have been great notables in these areas who are women and who have contributed significantly to this field of science, whether it's robotics, whether it's aerospace, health, genetics, communication. But what we see that even though these women are not projected in a world of Newtons and Einsteins, there are very few women who are highly noted for their work. So greater needs to be done in this area. And so with this huge disparity, and especially in this lower middle income countries or the developing world, so there was a need especially to cater to these women who are early career into research, and to provide a support or a platform for them so that it could provide an initiative or a platform for them to project their capabilities. And because it's highly unlikely that the girls have the confidence to pursue a career when there's ongoing absence of positive representation of women, and increasing the visibility of women in science can provide this much needed source of inspiration for these young girls, early career women, so that they can explore careers in this and maybe be the future leaders in these areas. So this project Women in Science was launched recently, and the key areas of focus of this initiative are reproductive, maternal, newborn health. It also includes nutritional sciences. It has also a focus on climate change and SDGs. This project is launched by the Institute of Global Health and Development at Aachen University in collaboration with University of Oxford and the Sick Kids Toronto. And as Dr. Bhutta mentioned, it has been through a grant received by Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. So what is this project, and who are the women that we are targeting with this initiative? So the women that we are targeting through this initiative are early career women researchers, especially working in the countries of South Central Asia and East Africa. So the current criteria is that they should be at a junior faculty level, which in this region could be assistant professor or below, or pursuing a postdoctoral fellowship. They should hold an academic degree and training from a recognized institution, demonstrate ability and promise for research in these key areas, and have the capacity and capability to pursue a hypothesis-driven research in these regions. So there are multiple phases to this project. And so the first was that we formed a global advisory body and a steering committee who would guide us throughout the process and help us implement each project to its true potential. The first step is the application call. So we've already sent out a call. So this project is a 3-year project. Just to clarify, we would have 3 rounds of application. And the first application has been sent. So the deadline for that is by the end of this month. Based on these applications, we are going to shortlist a group of young women researchers. And then they would be asked as a first phase of this project to take some online courses. So these are online self-assessment courses which are already available. It would be a mix of courses. There would be some mandatory courses which all selected participants have to take. And then there would be a list of courses which would be elective, and the participants would be select the courses which interest them most. And so a total of 8 courses would be taken by each individual. This would be a 6 months phase. When they've completed these courses during this time, after this, they would be evaluated through an evaluation system. And after that, we are going to shortlist 30 fellows or 30 participants who would be enlisted for a fellowship, an interscale fellowship. This would be a fellowship, a distant learning research fellowship under the guidance of global renowned mentors based at both Aachen University in Karachi and Nairobi, and also at the University of Oxford. So we would select 10 interscale fellows each year and a total of 30 fellows over the course of this project. And during this fellowship time, they would work with their mentors, develop a research proposal, and ultimately those proposals would be funded through this initiative. And the participants would then implement those projects under the guidance of their selected mentors. And once that research, it would be ideally a 12-month project that they would be funded for. And once that's done, the results done, they would be supported in publishing those, they would be supported in presenting those into international conferences or webinars. So just a few the list of courses that are part of the first phase of this project. So these are already available online courses. These would be made available free to all participants. And these are highly renowned, recognized courses which have been developed by leading universities across the world. And so with this, I would like to end my presentation. And this slide shows the call that we have with an application deadline of 30th June. The link for the application is there. And I would highly encourage everyone who's interested to apply, and also to circulate this call to all the people who could benefit from this. So thank you all.
Thank you very much, Dr. Jay. And I'm sure there'll be a number of questions on the exact specifics, etc., as we go along. But without further interruption, let me pass on to our second lead speaker for this session, which is Professor Stephen Kennedy. Professor Kennedy is very well known internationally to people in the whole area of maternal and newborn research. He is a professor at the University of Oxford's Nuffield Department of Women and Reproductive Health, and a governing body fellow, co-director of OMFI, which is the Oxford Maternal and Perinatal Health Institute, located at Green Templeton College in Oxford. He is the principal investigator, along with Jose Villar, since 2007, of the groundbreaking Intergrowth 21st project, a large-scale multi-center population-based study, which looked at almost 70,000 mothers and newborn infants in defining growth standards for intrauterine growth to parallel the multi-center growth reference study the WHO had done for infants and children afterwards. I had the great pleasure of working with Dr. Kennedy and Dr. Villar on this particular project, and he's since then followed up with the InterBio project, which looks at a range of pathologies in the maternal perinatal period. He's very well recognized for his research in this field, and more recently during COVID-19, he was part of the large Inter-COVID project, which looked at the impact of COVID-19 on women and newborn infants. So today, Stephen was going to talk to us about pathways to impact. What are the priority areas for women's scientific leadership in the developing world? Stephen, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Zulfikar. Let's see, I'll share the screen and share. Can everyone see the screen? Can everyone see my screen? Masuma, have I done the right thing?
Yes, we can. But you're,
hang on.
but you're in the presentation mode.
There. Thank you, Zulfikar, for that kind introduction. And thank you, Dr. Das, for, if you like, setting the scene to what I'd been asked to speak about, and that is pathways to impact, with specific emphasis on how we should focus on certain things to make things better, so as to improve the likelihood that women will progress, not just through careers in science, but to leadership roles as well.
Stephen, can you go on full screen mode? You are in display mode, you know.
Am I? Oh, hang on, sorry.
Just make it full screen. Yep.
Hang
no.
Hang on.
To the top. No.
We did it okay last time. I'm so sorry.
Dr. Stephen, please use the slideshow. Use the slideshow button on top of your screen.
Yeah.
Use the slideshow.
No.
Oh, okay. 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 Use
Slideshow.
that one.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is that better?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. And my talk will focus on 4 specific topics. I'm build on what Dr. Das was talking about, namely What is the situation that faces women throughout the world? Then look at some of the underlying barriers that exist to a career, not only in science, but as a leader. To talk then about what needs to be done so as to improve matters, and finally to consider some of the benefits of improvement. For those of you that would like to read a little bit more on the subject, could I recommend to you two reports. The first produced by UNESCO on the state of science in general in the world, with a specific focus on the role of women. And the second, a more recent publication from WHO and the Women in Global Health Organization, which looks at some of the solutions to closing the leadership gap in global health in general. And some of the slides that I've taken and many of the concepts have emerged from these policy documents. So the first thing to say, like, as Dr. Das so rightly emphasized, is that the leak, the loss of women in science starts much, much earlier than leadership roles. And as you can see here from this graphic, there is no shortage of women going into undergraduate degrees, but from the point of PhD onwards, there is a marked loss of women for a variety of reasons. And again, as Dr. Das emphasized, when one looks at the roles that women have in leadership in the general sphere of global health, the figures are quite striking. For example, only 31% of ministers of health are women. Only 27% of women sit as executive heads or board chairs of global health organizations, and most strikingly, only 28% are deans of top public health and medical schools. And if one looks at the percentage of women that have acted as national representatives of the World Health Assembly, you can see that from 2005 to the present day, over the course of 15 years, there has been very little improvement despite the recommendations of many bodies around the world. Unfortunately, COVID has made things even worse. So the disruption that COVID has caused in both the health and science sectors has largely exacerbated the existing systemic barriers to promotion and advancement to leadership positions, felt not only by women, but by disadvantaged groups in particular, as inevitably work and home activities have merged. And just as to give you one example of what I mean by that, in a paper published in the BMJ Global Health Journal 2 years ago, it showed that only 85% of the 115 national COVID-19 task forces had majority male membership. So women are not being equally represented in decision-making at a global level with regard to the pandemic, either globally or at the national level. So what are some of the underlying barriers to promotion within science and global health in general? Well, inevitably, and as Dr. Das emphasized, gender stereotypes and discrimination constrain the ability of women to move into senior leadership roles. Why is that? Or what is the effect of such stereotyping and discrimination? Well, inevitably, it's harder to access training to advance one's career, due to all sorts of conflicts and responsibilities outside work, and inevitably preference that's given to male colleagues. So almost universally, and this doesn't just apply in the developing countries, it also applies, in my own country, there's often, unfortunately, very poor support for leadership bids. There's also the so-called glass ceiling, where a woman's performance within an academic department tends to be more closely scrutinized than that of her male colleagues. So the leadership opportunities are often unequal for women. That then has the effect of reducing career satisfaction, causing loss of morale, reduced income, lack of recognition, and then inevitably less research funding, which makes the likelihood of promotion even less. It's very important, however, to take an intersectional approach to the problem. Not doing so belittles the complex nature of the problem. And that's what I mean by that. Well, it's different forms of discrimination. All combine, overlap, and intersect, be they to do with race, social class, age, ethnicity, and even sexual identity. So combining the way that those problems, those discriminatory factors interact with each other and intersect is an absolute requirement to trying to reduce the barriers to accessing leadership roles. And I think, broadly speaking, there are three specific areas where governments and individuals can actually make things better. Governments must build the foundation for greater equality. And that may mean introducing laws to prohibit discrimination against women at work and sexual harassment, introducing laws to ensure that equal pay is achieved for equal work, and that there's much, much greater transparency about the gender pay gap between men and women. Parental leave and family-friendly policies must be introduced by governments. And that includes, and again, my own country is as guilty as anyone else, as any other country, must include subsidized and state-funded childcare and flexible working. And as previous speakers have already mentioned, everything must start from the ground upwards, which means improved access to education for girls, especially in the STEM subjects. We as leaders in science have to address ourselves problems that exist in the workplace and the culture that exists within academic departments. How does one go about doing that? Well, it means establishing senior champions that speak out about gender equality, including absolutely zero tolerance for bullying within the department and sexual harassment. And targets and quotas need to be established transparently to ensure that academic departments achieve gender parity in leadership roles. And then in terms of helping to promote leadership and helping to ensure that promotion occurs in an equal and fair way requires gender transformative strategies. And what do I mean by that? Well, very simply, things like anonymized applications, gender balanced interview panels. No longer is it acceptable to have an entire interview panel consisting of men and only men, particularly when interviewing women. And during the course of interviews, non-discriminatory questions and language have to be introduced. And lastly, what can we do to help women to achieve leadership roles? Well, as has already been mentioned, establishing formal and informal networks for leadership development is essential, with the provision of information and training opportunities that exist both locally, nationally, and globally, as we are attempting to do in this program. There has to be increased public visibility of women in decision-making roles. Why? Well, to act as an inspiration to both men and women, actually, and to normalize female leadership in one's organization. In the field of scientific journals in particular, I think journals should be tracking and publishing key metrics about, for example, the number of female authors that are being accepted, particularly as first and last authors. And lastly, and perhaps more importantly than anything else, as Dr. Abu Bakr mentioned, mentorship of early and mid-career women is essential, so as to equip them with the knowledge, the insight, skills, and motivation to enable them over time to apply for leadership roles. And finally, what are the benefits? Well, aside from the benefits to individual women, organizations, science departments, government ministers must appreciate that more women leaders will increase the number of role models and mentors for both men and women, and break these terrible stereotypes that exist of men as natural leaders. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Stephen, for that succinct but very thoughtful and forthright summary of the global situation. Now, we have a ton of questions that are coming up in the chat as well as in the Q&A, and I'll get to those in a minute. But let me start by asking both of you, how do you think this particular program that has been put together, how will this move the needle? Let me start with you first, Stephen. How do you think this can contribute in a tangible way of changing what is a very, very big problem?
I think through, what we've done is we've brought together two of the foremost academic institutions in the world with specific interest in global health and the science that sits behind so many of the problems that face the disadvantaged and vulnerable, particularly mothers and newborns. So to have such easy access to good training programs and, more importantly, research and mentors is unique, I think. That's my simple answer to the question, Zulfikar.
Jay?
Yeah, so I think that this is a great initiative, because what I have learned over my career in this area, that although there are problems at the basic level, but women who even graduate or do masters or start this career, the first problem or the first hurdle is getting some initial projects, some initial funding, do some initial research work on their own. And I think this initiative provides them the much needed launch pad that these early career women need. And once they get this platform and they're able to do some work in this area, so and publish something, work under global mentors who are leaders, make some connections, learn from them, I think that this could be have far-reaching impacts. And this is not just getting a fellowship or getting one project done, but I think this could be a launch pad for greater things. And the initial hurdle could be handled through this initiative. And I think then the sky is the limit for these young, enthusiastic women scientists.
So I think it's important that you have a role model somewhere of some institutions having developed something like this. But what I'm seeking is there any evidence that it moves the needle, does make a difference? So let me turn to Amina Abubakar and ask Amina if in her experience in Africa, initiatives such as the one that she led or is leading, and this one could make a difference.
I think I can't say based on, like research, but from personal experience and some of the colleagues whom I would consider have done well and stayed in research, mentorship programs that have really provided the initial guidance, initial, exposure, the right quality of networks and, mentors, both local and global, I think has really made a difference in the careers of several of my colleagues. So based on just, what my personal experience and some of people whom I've seen have gone out to become, directors at WHO, to lead very large institutions in research, I think these programs can really make a difference.
I think that it's simply the offer of mentorship. All the senior faculty associated with this program are committed to the concept of taking a personal interest in the career development of early to mid-career researchers. And I think that matters a great deal.
I think that's, as someone said, one of the most difficult things in public health for a public health graduate is getting your first job. And I know from personal experience, for an academic, one of the very first big challenges is getting your first grant and getting your first publication in a reasonably reputable peer-reviewed journal. Those are very important barriers. And I think if this particular project can push the envelope a little bit, just make it a little bit easier for younger academics, particularly female, who have to fight, as Dr. Noor Bhatt has pointed out in his comments, a lot of cultural, barriers or discrimination, then that will go a long way. I don't think that there is anything inherent that stops women scientists from achieving the same level of achievement as men. In fact, they've been very equal in if you look at the global distribution of science laurels, in some places more recent than in the past. But it's also the fact that they do face a lot of social discrimination and cultural barriers in various circumstances because of their dual roles as sometimes mothers, as homemakers, as people who have to have more flexible approaches to science. So this project might make things a little bit different and better. So there are a lot of questions, Jay, that I don't think you need to answer in plenary here on who can apply. So there are lots of questions on whether residents can apply, master students can apply, those in research training can apply. So do you want to say a word about what was our thought process in putting this squarely within a faculty dimension? Go.
Right. So we have had many questions regarding this since we have launched this call. And so for this, we have even circulated frequently and FAQs for this, so to respond to these questions. So the idea was that because when we talk about women and in this public health arena, so there are a lot of fields, people who are doing some implementation, people working with NGOs, people at their different career, doing their bachelor's, master's, PhDs, people who are in the faculty role and not in the faculty role. So for this initiative, we had an internal deliberation with the group, with the advisory committee that we have. And the idea was that we should support people or individuals who have some academic role and who are affiliated with an institute so that they could benefit more rather than people, as Dr. Bhutta mentioned, that of course, sky is the limit, and there's a huge sea that we can support. But of course, every project, every initiative has their limitations. So initially, we are trying to focus on these early career academic position holders to support them and provide them with this much needed launchpad for their early career. And maybe in the future, we will expand to more. And inshallah, if we have further grants or further support from funders, we are going to support women across the board who are working at different entities and at their different career paths.
Right. Well, there are questions from people as to whether they need to resign from their current positions, if they are in research training positions. Absolutely not. We actually want people to continue their careers, and that's why this whole project or program is flexible. It's distant learning, and with some opportunity of working, for short stints of time with specific individuals. So the idea is for people to remain in place as to where they are studying and where they are working, and to build on that, over time. So it's very much a development project which helps people with their career pathways. Secondly, how people can approach this and see if there are tailor-made applications. So my answer to that would be that they just apply individually to the program leaders, to Dr. Jaidas or to myself at the Institute for Global Health and Development, and we will provide as much individual input as we can. There's a question as to whether or not the program requires physical presence at any of the university campuses or in Oxford for any length of time. Do you want to answer that, Jay and Stephen?
Yeah.
And if so, for how long?
Right. So I think the first question was very important, and it's very important to clarify that I'll overemphasize what Dr. Bhutta mentioned, that all the participants that we select for this, they don't need to resign from their job. And absolutely, this whole project is designed that the participants can work within their flexibility. So they continue doing what they are doing in their current job. And these are all flexible courses, all are flexible, and the participants can tailor their time according to their own, what I can say is ease, and finish these tasks within the time frame that we have. And we don't require a physical presence for this. So much of this would be online or through distant learning. But we have kept a provision that there would be a one-off chance for these participants who are selected as interscale fellows to have one-off meeting with their mentors, and this could be decided mutually between the mentor and the candidate, and we can provide one-off support for them to go there and discuss or build up on their relationship, build up on the project that they want to do. But it's all, there's huge flexibility in this, and all the participants and all the candidates could tailor this to their own ease.
I think that's terribly important. The concept of tailoring the program to meet the individual needs of each person. That's the ethos of this program.
So there's a very important question, Stephen, that you should answer. So what if women who work under male supervisors do not have the support to go to such fellowships?
Don't have the support because of institutional bias, or because...
Yeah, I think what is implied here is that if you come from a situation where, I mean, I can well imagine somebody takes an application to their supervisor to say, I want to do this. And the supervisor says, no, I will do this instead, without knowing what the project is all about. So how do you think we can go around it? Firstly, let me say, we don't require, other than the candidate themselves declaring that they are working in a program, etc., any formal recommendation letters from people's bosses or departments. So this is very much an individual program. And therefore, if you think you are eligible and you are in a stable position and you want to partake something like this, apply. And nobody will, at least we will not seek any letter of support from your immediate boss, other than the fact that you would have to provide some documentation to indicate that you are in a faculty position or in an academic position. So sorry, I interrupted you, Stephen. Please go.
The hope and expectation is that that won't happen.
Yeah.
That's the hope and expectation. And if it does happen, then we haven't discussed this amongst the leaders of the program as to what positive moves could we make to help that individual. But I think it would be possible through personal intervention.
Yes.
If there really is institutional objection or institutional barriers. I think it's unlikely that anyone would resist Dr. Bhutta ringing them up, to be perfectly frank.
No, it depends on how.
And after all,
yeah,
I mean, the potential benefits of this program for the individual are so great that I find it difficult to believe that anyone would stand in the way of an individual.
Having said that, of course, Stephen, I mean, as I said,
absolutely.
Trust but verify. But so I think we will have to deal with this. But my suggestion is that you apply. And you remember, there are two phases to this Women in Science project. The first phase is totally free to everybody. And I expect hundreds of people to apply for that, which is basically the online learning courses. You have to register, we'll make them available to you. You can learn on your own time, you can read, you can do all 15, 16 courses if you like, or you can just do the few that you think will be of value to you. There are some core courses. There's no fee. There is just the requirement for registration, and you can do it at your own time and pace. I expect everybody can do that, and nobody will stop you, because nobody gets into your own spare time and dictates which courses can you take online, which website can you visit. The second phase, where you move from that general pool to a specific pool of competitive applicants, which are the 10 fellows that we will have every year, where you are also eligible to individual mentorship. You're also eligible for a research grant, which we will help you prepare and then fund you for this. And then you can also have access to other additional benefits, such as, for example, attending conferences, coming together. That may require some permissions, but as Stephen has said, if you encounter any difficulty, get hold of the course people and we can make a case for you if you qualify on merit to your programs to give you that. And he's absolutely right in saying that you can work through positive support rather than naming and shaming people. So let me move on to the other important questions that we have. One is, how can civic society organizations help in this venture? Have we thought of that, Jay? How do we get this word out outside of academics to civic society organizations also?
So the question is that we promote this initiative to those organizations, or for the participants to enroll for this?
No, I mean, I think it's basically, how can civic society organizations play an advocate role? How can they help get you candidates that may not necessarily be forthcoming from universities or academic centers?
So I think, we have.
I mean, we haven't discussed this, but
but
there are many women scientists working in NGOs,
right,
and in careers there. Are they potentially eligible?
So so initially we haven't articulated this clearly in our call, but we received a lot of individual queries regarding this. And what we have responded to those, and I would just reiterate that people who have been working in this area for a long time have made significant contributions, hold an academic degree in this public health area. So they are all eligible to apply, and we have our selection criteria. And if they qualify, so absolutely they can enroll for this.
Okay, I think this will need to be considered on an individual basis, but you're right. We will take this into account on the basis of who they are and what they are and where they are. Now, there's a question, can male members apply for this program? Down the road, we might consider something like this. At this stage, the focus is to enhance the capacities and the numbers of female and women scientists in this area. Stephen, there is a question on the Oxford component of the program of training. Could you say a word or two about that as to what do we envision that the University of Oxford will be able to add to those fellows who are selected for mentorship and support at Oxford?
Yes, the research projects that we envisage offering to those 10 fellows each year relate very much to the global health programs that we have in maternal and newborn child health, both into growth and into bio. And we, as Dr. Bhutta first mentioned when he introduced me, these are very large global programs that look at the way in which the environment affects human growth and development from early pregnancy to 2 years of age. And we have accumulated a vast amount of clinical, ultrasound and laboratory data, vast amount. And there are countless projects either to be given to potential fellows or for potential fellows to generate ideas themselves to do secondary analyses of the existing data. That's will be the focus for the fellowships. But then again, within the university department, there are numerous other projects taking place in relation to maternal newborn child health, both clinical and purely scientific. And fellows will be free to focus their attention on any one of those projects, given the commitment that exists within the senior faculty of the department to support this program.
Jay, there was a question which I should have addressed to you earlier, which was around what are we specifically thinking of in terms of women scientists or women professionals in conflict-affected areas or fragile contexts.
So I think, yeah. So the question is that whether we're eligible to apply, or women who work.
No, but can they have something more tailor-made to the context? And yes, of course.
Okay,
how
context.
do you get...
So yeah. So we have some online courses related to that, specifically working in those humanitarian settings. So, and even those fellows that we select out of the pool, so that they would also be supported to develop projects, especially in those humanitarian settings. And so yes, we do have thought about it, and we have online courses and the potential to develop courses in those areas.
In fact, those are some of the geographies that we hope to have quite a number of candidates from need, and also the fact that opportunities are few and far between in many of those institutions for those who want to learn in this space or train in this space.
Absolutely.
There's a question on discipline, can dental students apply? Can those who are, in training in universities apply? So, I mean, training we've already addressed, but there is no restriction on people being physicians. They can be nurses, they can be dental specialists, they midwives, insofar as I'm concerned, and just to have the right approach to developing a career in science. So maybe I can ask Masuma a question. Masuma, there's a question on, are we going to have a social media dissemination strategy?
Yes, Dr. Bhutta, we are actually, we do have a social media strategy for this. It's already under process. And for every phase, we have designed a very specific strategy with a specific goal.
Okay, and you will be able to, at some stage, send it out to the participants of this webinar.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. All right. We have tackled a large number of questions in relation to this. Let me ask one more question or an explanation to Dr. Das. Could you say something more about transition from phase 1 to phase 2 for this program? How do you envision that will happen, and a little bit about the selection process or the evaluation?
So we have some objective criteria to select participants even for the first step. And once they are completed their required online courses, they would be evaluated on a specially tailor-made course test that we would have. And based on the results of those, because the fellowships would require an English proficiency test. So we also have, we'll support that. It's not necessary that they take the IELTS or any other course, but even the AKU itself has their own English assessment test, and we are going to evaluate them on those. So the performance in the online courses, the performance in the assessment test that we do, the English assessment test, and also there's some scoring which would be done based on their past education, their career, the track, and the most importantly, the potential to uptake and the capacity to do this fellowship, to develop a protocol, and most importantly, be able to conduct that research. So there's an objective criteria looking at all those domains, and the candidates who would score the maximum in those would be selected. The 10 candidates each year would be selected for this fellowship.
All right. I mean, do you have any views on this, Stephen? On this transition from phase 1 to 2, will you be looking at other attributes beyond scores?
Motivation, enthusiasm, and the hardship that I think that the individual has already experienced. So, the greater the need, the greater I think the more we will consider the candidate.
All right, wonderful. There's a question from Ambereen on whether or not there's going to be an age limit rather than a faculty position limit. She says, I've seen a 50-year-old woman working as a lecturer and at the same time, a very, very young person working as assistant professor. So I think we are obviously, as is self-explanatory, looking at the next generation of scientists. So there are always exceptions in various disciplines, but the idea here is to take people early in their careers, younger people. Not that there is anything wrong with people who are older in the profession, but we've decided to take on the future. So the younger scientists, the younger early career staff, and provide them this opportunity and see how they benefit from it or partake of this over a period of time. All right, let me pass. I'll ask Dr. Amina Abubakar if you have any questions or suggestions for the program before we move towards the last part.
I think no specific questions. I feel it's a really well thought out program. The only other suggestion I would have is really the development of long-term mentorship, because I think those long-term relationships really contribute. My mentor for the last 18 years remains my biggest champion throughout my career. So that would be my only extra suggestion. Thank you.
Completely agree. And I would say that there are obviously scientific mentors, but there are also people who as faculty or as seniors develop a more close, real mentor Sherpa relationship with you. And this project will offer an opportunity for both, for people who can be your scientific advisors, but also people who can provide you advice, career guidance over time. And we have a fantastic panel of women chairs and senior faculty members at East Africa and here who will be able to provide that level of support over time that is probably reflected in this question. Well, I think we have absolutely had a thrilling, fantastic, R+, where we've gone through a lot of this project and its ethos, its genesis in detail. It now gives me great pleasure to invite our Vice Provost, Dr. Anjum Halai, to say a few words. Dr. Halai, to those people who don't know her, is, as I said, our current Vice Provost at Aga Khan University. She obtained her doctoral training. Again, there's such a lot of Oxford connections. She obtained her PhD from Oxford and was an adjunct professor in Alberta, University of Alberta, for a while, and then a research fellow in Sussex University. And she is specifically focused on social justice questions and issues in education. She is a member of the advisory committee on Women's Leadership Academy at AKU, and she is also a member of the Women's Leadership Group in Pakistan, set up by the Higher Education Commission. And she has designed a course for women leadership for mid-career women in higher education as well. She, as I had mentioned, is currently the Dean of Faculty of Arts and Sciences at Aga Khan University, and she's leading the development of the academic programs for the faculty FAS as part of this process. So let me pass the floor to Dr. Anjum and ask her to give us her reflections, please. Dr. Anjum.
Thank you, Dr. Bhutta, for that generous introductory remarks. Assalamu alaikum and good day, colleagues and participants in this webinar. It really is a great pleasure for me to be giving my closing comments. As you know from what Dr. Bhutta said, looking at social justice issues, particularly from women's participation, is an area of research interest for me. And I have my career in education and research, and it is from this perspective that I will make a few remarks. And I will particularly respond, Dr. Bhutta, to your question when you raised it, that how will this program move the needle? In closing, so I will draw on education research and the recommendations that emerge from that body of literature of how to support girls and women in STEM education. We spoke about access, and access remains an issue, particularly in low and middle income countries, access for girls and women. Access remains an issue in societies which are highly traditional and have patriarchal norms. And I mean, just for an example, the website of the Higher Education Commission in Pakistan, where I'm currently working, notes that access to higher education is very unevenly distributed. Only 0.4% of youth from the lowest income quintile are enrolled in higher education institutions, which is far below the national average of 10%. So access is an issue. And of course, policymakers, education stakeholders, ministries of education start by taking initiatives to improve access. Wasila-e-Taleem in Pakistan is a conditional cash transfer program to improve girls' access to basic education. The ESSA scholarship program of the higher education ensures that at least 50% of the scholarships go to young women. That's fine. But education research says access is a necessary but not a sufficient condition for gender parity in education, in STEM education, in positions of leadership. Why? Because gender parity is a multidimensional socio-cultural issue. There is a very strong pro-male bias, especially, and this has been documented by World Bank research time and again, that in context of abject poverty, if parents and community have $1 to spend, then they will spend it on their male child's education. And the decision to spend it on the female child for education will come only if they have additional resources. So there is that pro-male bias, which then has to be taken into account when governments, ministries of education are taking measures to ensure parity in access. Of course, when we talk about cultural and traditional norms, I was reading Dr. Bhatt's comments in the chat box, and he referred to those cultural beliefs and biases. Then also education has an important role to play. Unless boys and men who are the dominant in gender hierarchy, unless they are educated for an egalitarian gender order in society, then this aspiration to have gender parity for women in careers of science and STEM can remain like an elusive dream. So that needs to be done across levels of education. And there are many strategies, and I'm pleased to note that several of those strategies are already built into this program. In societies, and this I think applies across the board, not just only to low-income countries, that women have had to struggle to be decision makers. Their role is very much seen in an hierarchical society. Their role is not that of a decision maker. This leads to low sense of self-efficacy very often, and that low sense of self-efficacy affects when in their career progression, especially when putting in applications for deanships or positions of authority. So mentorship is important for women, especially at early career levels, to build their confidence, to build their resilience. And therefore, I agree with Dr. Amina Abubakar when she says that it should be mentorship over a period of time and not just over a period of the project. And agree, Dr. Bhutta, that not everything can be done in the life of this project, but AKU does have, and I know Oxford, from my experience, does have mentorship support. We spoke a lot about role models in science, and I could not agree more. There is ample research in basic education that for girls, especially in secondary and higher secondary levels, the point at which they choose which career pathway to take, whether to go in STEM or whether to go for other career options, the girls' motivation and participation is greatly enhanced if they see positive role models of women in the course of their education. Now, I'll give you an example. Mariam Mirzakhani, for example, was an Iranian mathematics and a professor of mathematics at Stanford University. In 2014, Mariam received the Field Medal, the most prestigious award in mathematics, becoming the first Iranian and the only woman to date to have received the Field Medal in mathematics. Do you find the life history of Mariam Mirzakhani as a role model, as a woman role model in the textbooks, in school education books, in mathematics education books? I'm sorry, to date, I have reviewed many textbooks. Women role models are few and far between, and they are not named. So this is something I was very pleased when Jaidas showed that slide of women in science who had made their mark, and that's an important contributor to motivate young girls and women to enter into the career. On the ground, the critical mass of women scientists is low in context of development, and here I mean development in the sense of scientific development in low and middle income countries, and therefore it is important to build networks and to build synergies. And this partnership, for example, is one very important example of building those synergies, building those partnerships. Even within AKU, there are other initiatives that this program can reach out to. So, for example, Women's Surgeon Association is there. The Working Group for Women is there. And Dr. Amina Abu Bakr is on the brink of launching the Women's Leadership Academy. The Women's Leadership Academy will actually be reaching out to women in civil society and to train them and educate them for leadership positions. So those are some of the features that we have from education research that inform, that give recommendations of how we can support women, early career women in science, in the fields of science. And it gives me great pleasure to know that most of these features are already incorporated in the program. One thing that I would like to add, which may be there, but I didn't hear more about it, is how would the alumni network be sustained from this program? So would there be some way in which those who graduate from this program will continue to be provide a support mechanism to other cohorts and to each other, is something that could become part of the building synergies and support network. And I would, in closing, I would like to again thank Dr. Zulfikar Bhutta, Dr. Kennedy, Dr. Jaidas, Amina Abu Bakr, and all the panelists for raising, all the participants for raising such important questions. Thank you very much on behalf of AKU. I appreciate it greatly, because those of us who have worked at AKU know that women's empowerment, women's support in career, and ensuring that women are in leadership position is very much a part of the ethos at AKU. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Anjum, for those very kind words. And we are exactly at time, or a little over it, but I will take the pleasure to perhaps close out by thanking you for your participation and your support, to thank our speakers, worthy speakers, for taking us through this program, Dr. Amina Abu Bakr for providing the leadership and her sagacious advice from her own platform at the Institute for Human Development, and to many members of staff at AKU, notably in the Institute for Global Health and Development. So Masuma Raza, thank you very much for putting all of this together. And also, although not present on today's call, Diana Mackay, for working with us over the last several months and making sure that we launched our new initiative with its explanatory webinar. Now, I realize I've not been able to go through every comment that was in chat or every Q&A, but many of them relate to the kind of details that you can drop us an email or write to us, and we will get back to you. We are fairly close to finalizing the first cohort for this project, and it would be great to have a fabulous, as they say, an inaugural class to undertaking this. Thank you very much. God bless, and look forward to being in touch.